Oh, hello, I didn't see you there. It seems that you've caught me playing with Diceself.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time zone it is, whether you in the world, it is your Lord and Saviour with episode 1 of season 2 of the Playing With Diceself podcast, where this sad British goth boy will be playing TTRPGs by himself, and we are playing Wraith the Oblivion 20th Anniversary Edition, alongside my own latest homebrew, The Hopeful Damned, a homebrew for Wraith the Oblivion in 2 parts. The first part is a bunch of one-shots that you could play with regular friends and regular play with a regular ST, and the other part are some solo rules so you can play Wraith the Oblivion by yourself, regardless of edition, whether it's first, second, Great War, or 20th Anniversary Edition, the focus of this specific series, and homebrew, I should say. Now, in the previous episode, we had our session 0, which is mainly the character creation, where we created Taylor, a non-binary rebel skater gal person thing who was raised on the streets because they had really shitty parents. Their dad was doing the whole drug cartel and weapons smuggling thing. We don't know too much about the mum, but I kind of decided that they were sort of dancing away in a cocktail bar somewhere somehow. And Taylor would then be adopted by more conservative parents who were controlling and very abusive, who didn't approve of their rebellious ways and their non-binary lifestyle. And they also didn't approve of the choice of partner, Courtney, who is also non-binary. And after some altercations, which we haven't properly worked out yet, Taylor would end up killing their assigned cop at birth father, make a run for it because they realise they had fucked up monumentously, and they get smacked by a car, the car of which would end up being one of their fetters. And it sort of left everybody in a bit of a right old pickle, as Taylor has now returned as a Wraith, so to speak. Now, before we properly get stuck into the session, I want to address one or two things. The first part is that with the character sheet that I was using last time, I assumed that despite having the first edition design, it was still 1-to-1 20th Anniversary Edition. I didn't catch it at the time, but lore, LAW, is not a stat within 20th Anniversary Edition, so you might have seen at the end of the session 0, but I did rectify that with a proper 20th Anniversary Edition sheet, and I just added another dot in investigation because Taylor had 1 originally, now they have 2. The second part is we are going to be running a one-shot adventure of my own creation called Floodlands, which you can find in this homebrew, which I'm not going to be showing you because I want you to experience the full thing yourself, but obviously we're going to be going through it, so you're going to have some semblance of spoilers. Now I say some semblance of spoilers because you'll know the story beats, like what happened to A, B, and C, but the whole point of this chronicle one-shot thing is that you're going to be using the tools found within this homebrew to generate and customize your adventure. So it's not like your traditional chronicle where you're told every single thing that happens and you're going to be told every single type of role. You're going to have some story beats like checkpoints, as you were, and then in between that, you are going to be generating the action, and in this case I am going to be generating the action. So your scenario of Floodlands is going to be very different to my own, and for Floodlands I had to put in a dot of contact for a specific NPC that we're going to be interacting with for the duration of the one shot. And I also use that context as a means for giving us life web, so we're able to find our fetters a bit more, and also able to deal with that car that hit us because it's not so contained within our little social bubble. So without further ado, let's get stuck into Floodlands. So the NPC is called Lucretia or Lucita. I'm not entirely too sure of the pronunciation, even though I have generated the name. We're going to go for Lucretia, and she was there when you first came to the Shadowlands. She is a product of the late 80s, early 90s goth scene, dressed in black jeans, a tank top, a neat black eyeliner, and nails. Her big hair is dyed black, with the ends tipped dyed a dark but pronounced crimson. You get the impression that she is trying to hide something on her body. Do you ask? What does she say? Taylor, I don't think, is going to ask. Now, I'm implying there is some sort of wound there, but we're not going to inquire much more about that. And as I said, I had to put her as a contact, as recommended by the chronicle situation. So, we now have to decide how we came about meeting Lucretia. So that's done with a very simple D10 roll, so let's see what happens. I rolled a 6. Lucretia is not aligned with any major faction in the underworld. She is, in many ways, like you, a poor, wayfaring stranger in a strange land trying to numb her feelings of aloneness. She's seen you around the Shadowlands trying to find your way, and she's curious about you. You're not sure why, yet neither is she. Would she even tell you anyway? Since she helped you that one time, she feels responsible for you, but lacks the experience and influence to be a proper mentor. She does what she can, not being beyond asking for help when she needs it. Is this the beginning of a friendship, or does something more sinister fuel her motives? Would you start your circle with her, or try to get her involved in a faction you're allied with? And each of these different points of origins do have these questions for you to try and flesh out your character and your relationship with this NPC. And at this time, I'm not too sure if Taylor is actually particularly trusting of anybody. We probably feel they're going to be more aligned with the Renegades if that will come up during play, but I don't know, to be honest. But like us, Lucretia is a wayfaring stranger, and just as I've just read out to you, she feels partly responsible for us. So, let us start talking about Lucretia in terms of stats. Lucretia is considered to be slightly stronger than the player character and is capable of handling herself in combat. She has Argos 1, Castigate 3, Flux 1, Inhabit 3, Molliate 3, and Outrage 2. As I just read, Lucretia does not actually have Life Web, but she probably pointed us in the direction of somebody who could teach us, I suppose, which is that one favour. There we go. We've already established a bit more of a relationship there. She was able to point us in the direction of somebody who could teach us Life Web. And I really should put that down as a NPC. And I'm making that note purely because I'm going to forget about it, but also we can generate random scenes. I have the possibility of generating random scenes in between scenes, and NPCs could come up at unexpected moments, so we need to put that in there right away. It's Friday night, during that time of year when autumn snuffs out the summer heat and the rain starts to turn cold and bitter. In front of you, tucked away at the city's high street, is where Lucretia wants to meet you. The words "Body Electric" are lit in warm neon light on a sign above the door. By making an intelligence plus streetwise roll, let's just make that roll and see how successful we are before I get too much into the description. So that's 2 in intelligence and 2 in streetwise. That is 2 successes. I think we would know some of what I'm about to read. You can learn the club is more popular with Wraiths than with mortals. It's an underground club that plays alternative and independent music, leaning towards the gothic rock, its parent genres and derivative forms. And I think with 2 successes rather than the default 3 for getting a full success, as it were. I think Taylor would be partially familiar with it. Maybe in her youth she would have gone past it, or what? Well, her mortal youth, I should say. We're assuming, by the way, that Taylor is recently deceased. I think we can assume that Taylor would be partially familiar with this, but never really ventured for it, even though it's something that she would have wanted to have done. Really doesn't really know what it's like per se, other than it's a club, and can see from the people that are lining up right now that it's a goth club. So she doesn't know too much about it, so that may affect roles in the future. We can see many people of different colours, genders, shapes and sizes neatly lined up, buzzing with energy to enter the club. They look like they belong here, adorned with black outfits, makeup and wild hair, some more infused than others. Do you provide an opportunity to feed on pathos and or angst? Well, that is a good question. Well, Nothing really ties in at the moment with our particular fashions. Possibly with the dark passions, but I'm not going to leap too much into this at the moment, so I'm not going to force interactions for the sake of forcing them. The streets around you are resonant with a similar exuberance as cars dart in both directions and people walk stomping through the rain. What else do you see? Generate a scene to flesh out the environment and possible interactions. So, this is where we actually have to generate a scene using the homebrew rules. As it's explained in the How to Run Wraith solo video I did not too long ago, a video is going to appear on the card for you right now, you can generate scenes on the fly using a 2d10 dice roll or d100 roll. And I'm going to use a different set of d10s for this just because I like to have these separate. And the first die I'm going to see are the ones that I'm going to be using. So, I've pulled out an orange one and a blue one. Blue with some blacky bits and just construction orange. And I'm going to say blue is the 10s, oranges is the units. So we're going to roll in these two tables, scene type activity and scene type focus. However, that is not all, because we now actually need to add in what is called the Oblivion die to see if our shadow is going to colour our perception of this somewhat, or give some sort of pithy comment, or use a fawn or something to try and influence the direction of our wraith. Because remember, the psyche, the character that we're playing as, has a shadow, like a little devil on your shoulder sort of thing, that tries to pull you into the wind of oblivion, so to speak. I like to describe it as like a persona for the dark side of you that you don't wish to exist. It's all those nasty elements of you. It's all the self-doubt. It's all the nasty things that you think about yourself at 3 o'clock in the fucking morning when the brain just won't shut the fuck up. And for this, I'm going to be using my Cyberpunk Edgerunners die, because it was literally the other D10 that I found. And the way that this works is that whenever we generate a scene, a random scene, or a binary roll, which we'll touch upon in a moment, we have to include the Oblivion die to this roll. And if we get a result of a 1 or a 10, the shadow has to make an input with either of these table rolls, specifically with the scene generation. So let's roll the dice. Okay, so we've got a 52 and a 4 on the Oblivion die, which means the shadow is not saying anything for the time being. So 52 gives us a result of withdraw, a 7 on the Oblivion die, and a 6 on the other two. So the shadow is not inputting here. At least I'm not having to force the shadow into play here. I may decide to integrate it with natural roleplay, but it's not something I have to do here. So withdraw, and the result of 6 gives us reality. Withdraw reality. Well, the way that this is reading in my mind's eye is that Taylor, if you remember from what I described a minute ago about how they died and everything that's happened to them, I actually think that Taylor is not really focusing too much on the environment around her too much. Like, there's all these busy streets and whatnot. Like, she's probably seen lots of people really happy and, like, enjoying themselves and rushing them out in the rain I described, but I don't actually think she's paying all attention to that. I think they are just really fucking depressed, and they're just sort of, like, fostering inside, like, just standing out in the rain, just, like, out of habit, out of the cold, like, knowing that it's meant to be cold, but they can't feed it, because if you remember, the Shadowlands isn't the Skinlands, so there are people that are coming through and perhaps, like, passing through their shoulder or whatever. They're just standing there out of habit, out of, like, a lack of security for themselves. You know, it's just sort of Lucretia, I imagine, is quite not Lucretia, sorry, Taylor, who is quite a upbeat social character. I imagine them to be rather outgoing with their friends. They're very much alone here. And I do actually think the shadow would want to part words here, something on the lines of,
"Oh, you're always so damn miserable. Look at them all having fun around you. I wonder what's going to go wrong in their lives. Probably nothing as bad as everything that's gone wrong in your life."
And I imagine just Taylor just standing there, just shut up, just fuck off. Like, just sort of like slithering off down into the queue, passing people. She could easily walk through those individuals, but she's a wraith, so I think she's just going to, like, push through them and, like, just, you know, passing through them, as it were. I'm not going to spend any temporary corpus to pass through these people. It just, as a narrative thing, they're just sort of, like, clipping shoulders, as it were. Not really much of an action there, but it doesn't have to be. The scene generation can just add to the flavour of things. Lucretia told you to meet her in the club, so you should head inside at some point, which is what we're doing. As you do, Quick, the mortals, and Wraiths are dancing and gyrating to the heavy industrial dance tunes performed by a live band on a small stage at the far end of the club. Its driving beats and distorted guitars are much louder than any club or gig you remember going to, reminding you of your heightened senses to noise, and perhaps that you are a ghost. And I do, before I carry on reading, I do think that is a bit overwhelming for Taylor. Like, Taylor's probably been to parties, they've probably like snuck into clubs before, but this is quite loud and in her face, and it's just another reminder that they are very much dead. Unless you pay attention to what they are singing, requiring a perception plus performance roll, difficulty 7, she, the singer, is singing a poetic song about loss and regret with an angry rhythm as a chorus. And I'm reading that out now purely because I don't think that Taylor isn't paying all that much attention to it. It's just a lot of noise and all at once sort of thing. I will say actually that if there is any like sort of perception based roll here, I'm going to up the difficulty to by 1, so if it was difficulty 6 as standard, it's going to be difficulty 7 as standard, within the realms of the club, unless something else dictates otherwise. Red and white lights spin from the stage, twirling with the music and dancers beneath. Flesh out the club by using the oracle tables, in addition to 2 interactions of those inside, be it with a wraith or mortal, or a bit of both. Okay, so let's generate some more scenes here. So we got 96 with... Hold on, is that a 10 or a 1? It comes up with the edge runners. That's a 10. So on the edge runners dice here, it comes up with like the edge runners sort of anime symbol. The shadow is going to input in this scenario somehow, and I rolled a 96. I'm lead. That's going to be a bit worrying. And 9 with a 4. So the shadow's still going to input here. So, what was that? 9. Lead rival. And the shadow is going to intercept somehow. Oh boy, lead rival. Okay, so the way that I'm envisioning this is that we've established that Taylor is kind of anti-authoritarian, which is understandable given the character that she is. And I suspect that there is some sort of hierarchy legionnaire activity here, or at least they're just people watching about to make sure, because the club's busy or one, and there may be like 1 or 2 that's been dotted around, and I think that Taylor is like caught eyes of them. I'm not going to roll for it, I'm just going to say it's like pretty fucking obvious just to make sure that the wraiths behave, you know, sort of thing, because there are like a mingling of wraiths and quick about, as you described, and everyone's dancing about, and it's very clear who are quick and who are mortal. Maybe there is something about them that Taylor's seen, maybe Taylor's had a run-in with them before, and I think this rival thing would imply that there is some sort of interaction that they've had before. And this, to me, could either be an antagonistic sort of thing, or could be like a friendly rival thing, or maybe like it's someone who wants to bring them into the fold, because Taylor does have a dot of notoriety, so they've got into some trouble, and maybe this Legionnaire has seen something in them that try and pull them in, like to whip them into shape, whatever. So I think this would come into the format of, as I'm talking about this is just what's coming to mind, leading rival, like a dance sort of thing. And you've got this little, or it could just be a bit of friendly jousting or combat sort of thing, and I think we're going to decide that with a binary roll. And how that works is that you take 2d10, one of them serves as a positive die, which I'm going to use as the blue one, and the orange one I'm going to use as a negative die, and basically whichever number is the highest is the one that's going to be the victor, basically. But it depends on the context of the scenario that determines which one is the result that you would like. So ideally I would want this to be some sort of like awkward dance, because at least then I could get away from the situation or decline, whereas a sort of sparring thing with the context of the scene generation, it would imply that, to me, that Taylor's going to like stir the hornet's nest, whatnot, like kick shit up, as it were. So we have to include the Oblivion die as well, which may also influence things a lot more as well. So the shadow is influencing things already, but we have to include it in anywho. Okay, so it was a 10 on the positive die and a 1 on the negative die, and there was a 4 on the Oblivion die. So the shadow is not further influencing the scene. So it does mean that it's going to be this sort of like friendly dance sort of thing, whatever. And I think as Taylor is sort of like standing about minding their business, I'm going to retcon what I was describing a moment ago. That it's going to be this individual that's grabbed them by surprise and like pulled them in for a dance. This sort of this legionnaire, as I described, like, hey, it's been a while since I've seen you about. Fancy a dance? And Taylor's like, no, I really don't. I don't. No, come on, just a little bit. He's going to be a bit more handsy, as it were.
Oh, you're always so damn lighting up a little bit, Taylor. Come on, I know it's not your strongest suit, but he'll just go away if you just give him what he wants. I can help you.
No.
You won't do it, you'll just embarrass him. You're such a negative tease all the time. Come on, just let me help you just a little bit.
Fine. So I think this is how this is going to work. I would say this is like a charisma. I would usually say this is a performance, but I'm actually going to say this is charisma and subterfuge, because Taylor's now going to pretend to have a decent time so the guy can just fuck off and leave and be. And the shadow is going to help a little bit, which we're going to use in the form of shadow dice. So with a little help, I'm going to say they're going to add 2 shadow dice. And what that means is I'm going to use red d10s to symbolise this, and the blue ones to signal normal rolls. Not that that matters too much, because you can't fucking see anything. It's just for my own ease. That with the shadow dice, for every success that they get on the shadow dice, on top of our charisma and subterfuge roll, the successes on the shadow dice add to temporary angst. So, the charisma is 1, subterfuge is 3, so this is not a great pull for Taylor, but with adding the 2 shadow die, from that it becomes a pull of 5, which isn't awful now. Not great, but not awful. Okay, so we got 1, 2, we got a bot, so we have to remove one of those successes. I'm going to remove one of the standard die. So there's 2 successes here now. But one of them is on the shadow die, which means I have to up my 2 dots of Empery Angst to now 3. So Taylor is sort of like bullshitting their way through this dance to sort of... I'm obviously sitting in a chair and I'm a white guy, so I can't dance for shit. But you can imagine that she's very uncomfortable, that she isn't really wanting to, go through all the motions of this. But that, however, was going to imply that I'm going to let the shadow actually help them, because I'm actually going to employ the bad luck fawn, which I believe from memory, without checking up the book, which is what I'm doing now, by spending a temporary angst point, they're going to re-roll that. So I actually shouldn't have added that 3rd dot at all, which is fine. I can get rid of that in just a momento. For each angst point a shadow with bad luck spends, the Wraith is forced to re-roll 1 die, shadow going to choice. I tell a lie, because they did get the success of the shadow dice, so it does take them back up to 3, so that's now back down to 2. It's a bit confusing, apologies. They're actually going to roll the 10. Which actually gets it on a 6, so we have to accept that result. So they still have the 2 successes, so they're sort of dancing away, not really going on with it, and this legionnaire individual is like, oh, come on, you're not really enjoying it. He's going to go grab her again, and I think Taylor is going to give a good fucking shove away from this individual. And I'm going to say that there's going to be a standard difficulty of 6, and he's like, oh, fuck off. And so what's that going to be? I reckon it'll be a strength and brawl. So that's a roll of 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 successes. Yeah, that's kind of a good shove out the way. The Wraith goes back. Maybe they fall on their arse sort of thing. It's going to catch them off a bit by surprise. And it's going to allow Taylor just a bit of time just to get away back into the crowd, just so they're not manhandled anymore by this legionnaire rival, who I'm just going to note down, who may come again at a later point. So we now have to generate a second scene as per the instruction, as Taylor feels pretty bad with themselves.
Do you not know how to have fun? You're so good at it. Back.
Not alive anymore. The guy's a fucking creep. Just fuck off. And Taylor is skulking about the club, like probably sticking to the walls at this point. No, I think they're going to stay within the crowd a bit more, just, instinctively just moving and squishing past people sort of thing. Kind of people going through them and whatnot. So let's roll our scene generation tables. with the Oblivion die. So we got 55, which gives us the result of Disrupt. There's no shadow input yet. I think I will only mention that if the shadow does get involved, otherwise I'm just going to stretch this longer than it needs to be. And 11, so what was that? Disrupt, good. Disrupt, good. Well, the way that I'm envisioning this is that Taylor is moving around the club, and I think what she sees here is that she catches from her peripheral that there's another uncomfortable scene going on at the bar. Maybe there's this guy who's sitting on the bar, like, chatting away with this woman, and this woman who's just trying to enjoy herself by herself, and this guy's just being a bit of a fucking creep. You can imagine the sort of things that he's going on about. I'm not going to divulge into that here, but with our role here, I think it's going to be Taylor who's going to go in and save the fucking day. And you see, their options are pretty limited because they don't have a lot of means of interacting with the Skinlands. Pandemonium would make things a bit too awkward. Moliate only affects the Shadowlands, which really leaves us to Flux. Flux is the Arcanoi that allows us to disintegrate and speed up the aging process of materials. So if we go to page 166, I hope I put down 68 rather. Flux systems. Unless otherwise stated, each Flux art's difficulty is local to the Shroud rating. Okay, so what would be the Shroud rating here? I'm actually going to say this is a difficulty of 5. The Shroud, of course, being that veil that separates the Shadow and the Skinland, so Wraiths can't just walk through nilly-nilly, and of course mortals could potentially walk through into the Shadowlands. I'm actually going to say this is a difficulty of 5, purely because of the whole goth club slightly gloomier and doomier, and that also the presence of more wraiths here, I reckon. But I think it's more the vibe of the club that is going to dictate this. I'm going to say it's a difficulty of 5 for this particular role, and they're going to use Rot. Flux most common application increases the rate of decay in a material object. I think they're going to use it on the bar stool, maybe, and like just looking at it, because I believe this is one that works with like fucking looking at it. And if we're successful, it's going to cripple the stand so it topples over, and it'll just give the woman a bit of time just to fuck off, just to get away from this guy, somehow. The player spends 1 point of Pathos and rolls Dexterity plus Flux. If the alchemist isn't touching the object, the player also needs to spend 1 willpower. Oh, okay, so in that case, they can actually just go up and put their hand, or hands, around the bar stool, the bit that's supporting up the seat. So it's a point of Pathos. So that takes our 7 down to 6, and it's going to be Dexterity plus Flux. So what is that? 3 plus 1, so that's 4 dots. 4 dice, rather. And I'm not going to have the Shadow included with this. I would like some more dice, but that's just metagaming a little bit. And with this roll, the Shadow isn't going to interfere. Like, they're not going to help them, per se. Okay, so that is 1, 2 successes. No botches, which is nice. So, if the alchemist, the number of successes determines how much the target object ages over the rest of the scene. So, a month. The Sword's Header determines the effect of its aging as a given object, including the damage, if appropriate. Rot can't directly affect the living creatures of Wraiths, though it does foster the growth of microorganisms that might inflict some nasty infections if ingested. Yum. So, we're as I'm the storyteller here, as well as the player, I'm kind of wanting this to age a little bit. Maybe the stalls are a bit old. If it's sort of leaning more into like the 80s and 90s covering, maybe they're second-hand materials, and it could like break either now or the end of the scene. Actually, let's use a binary roll to determine this, to see the are these stalls brand new, or are they second-hand and old and will snap right now? I would like them to be... Well, the negative one would be that they're brand new, so positive for me is that they're old, I guess. So, positive die, which I've decided is the blue one. If that beats the negative die, then these are old. Hopefully the Oblivion die won't get in the way. Oh, that is lucky. Oh, no, that's not lucky. So what that is, I got a 9 on the positive die and a 6 on the negative die, but I got a 10 on the Oblivion die, which means that the Shadow is going to have some input here. And the way that I'm going to determine this is that, yes, we're saying this is quite old, and Taylor is holding on to the bar stool pole, and it works, and the guy, it snaps off and he falls off the chair, and there's a little gasp, and the woman, like, after like the moment of shock, she like just gets away, the sort of thing. I think the way that the shadow would influence this a bit more is a more subtle means. I think that Taylor actually isn't doing it so much for the woman's safety, but is actually doing it for the man to suffer. And I think that she's going to do the motion of like stomping his face, but of course as she's a ghost and doesn't have the means of interacting with the skin land, just that extra bit of anger, just like stomping on his face and just like motioning to spit on him, sort of thing. Like really fucking losing her temper at him, like wanting this guy to fucking die. And with that in mind, that, I think, is going to influence a dark passion roll with Kill the Foster Mother, Vengeance. Which I suppose is appropriate here, like vengeance of that woman being sexually assaulted or whatever exactly was going on, the more that nastier thing. So, the way that this is going to work, because this isn't directly connected to the dark passion, I can't roll for this difficulty of 6. So I'm going to make this difficulty 7. So I'm going to take the dark passion rating of 3, and for every 7 or higher I get, that's going to be a dot of temporary angst they're going to get. 3. Fantastic. So that takes our 2 up to 5. And I don't think the shadow would make much part in this, other just a little chuckle that Taylor may or may not hear, depending on what's going on in their mood or whatever. But I think that's going to be how Taylor is going to react to all of that. Just fucking anger and just wanting this guy to fucking die, as it were. And I think that does very much fit into the shadow taking some involvement here. So it doesn't have to always be like a fawn or a comment. It could just be really subtle things like that. So, with those two scenes out the way, and we now have Taylor just, huffing and puffing and just fucking kill him. Like, she looks around and Lucretia makes herself known, appearing in front of them, probably on the other side of the bar, as we're now seeing. Like your reflection, whether in the club or in or out, pursuing what left, for the reason she greets you with a smile. So she's behind the club, and I imagine behind the bar. She probably saw all of this happening, to be honest. And Lucretia goes, "It's so nice to see you," she begins. I hope I haven't torn you away from anything important, especially on such a dark and stormy night like this. She'll laugh at her bad joke and ask how your night has been. To which Taylor will respond, "Whatever, I guess. How about you?" And Lucretia will just sort of go, it's been uneventful. Seeing your little display just then has been rather amusing." "Oh, right, you think it's amusing that a guy's, sexually harassing a woman?" "No, I meant the sort of cartoony sort of display of anger. There are much nastier people in this world than a drunk guy that wants to chat up some woman." And I don't think Taylor will like that very much. Clearly, we're implying that Lucretia's sort of used to this sort of behaviour now, for better and for worse. For worse, for sure. "So I guess you're wondering why you're here," she will smirk. "So let me start at the beginning of the end. I was buried in the cemetery at the end of town, in a small crypt." She'll lean towards Taylor and say softly, "It's my haunt. The council wants to expand the land for apartments," she continues, moving away from you. "It would be upsetting to see the dead disturbed like this. But that crypt," Lucretia shakes her head, "I don't really want to lose that, so I want you to help me shut down the operation, or at least slow it down until I work out a better, more permanent solution." Lucretia runs her hand through her hair, clearly stressed. But let's see if we can actually identify whether she's stressed using a perception plus an expression/empathy roll. Now, Taylor doesn't have either of those, which doesn't affect the difficulty per se, but because we're saying that we're going to up the perception by 1, this is going to be a difficulty of 7, because lacking a talent for which expression and empathy fall under, it doesn't affect things here. So this is going to be just perception. However, I do have a specialty in perception, which is reading expressions, which means that for any 10s that I roll with that specific specialty, the dice explode, so I can continue to gain successes for every 10 that I get, I believe. I just have to quickly confer with the book there. Every time a Wraith uses his specialty, he has the opportunity to re-roll 10s on the initial roll in an attempt to gain an additional success. Okay, so they don't keep exploding, it's just they explode the once. So perception is 4. So I have 4 dice, and with every 10 that I get, may give us more successes. So let's hope we get that and don't get any botches. No 10, no botches, we've got 2 successes. So I don't think that gives us enough to properly work out that Lucretia is feeling stressed. But I does think it gives us enough to at least work out that Lucretia isn't quite right in some form or another. But I don't think Taylor is really of the mindset to ask at the moment, particularly the previous comment. Anyway, Lucretia says, brushing away her emotions, you owe me a favour, and if you've got nothing better to do than hang out in a club and as it pisses down, you can lend me a hand. As Lucretia finishes speaking, roll wit plus passion/feta difficulty 6. I wonder what that's going to be. So, what we're going to do, well, all my fetters are object-based, so it's actually going to be one of the passions. So, what doesn't say which passion it is, though. I'll choose one. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, catch a tiger by its toe. If he squeals, let him go. Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. So, the second one, so another 3. So, 6 dice overall. So, that second one is our father. The drug dealer. What is that? 1, 2, 3. Succeeding this roll, as you notice, said passion/feta, enter or leave the club. Those with Lifeweb will feel this and see this automatically, perhaps earlier tonight. How does this make you feel? How do they feel? What does your shadow think about this? Well, I imagine my shadow and Taylor have got a lot about this. So the two of them are finished talking, and I'm actually going to say that... Actually, a really simple one, actually. I'm going to use a binary roll. Is the dad sitting on the next bar stool that's like replaced the woman, or is they walking by? I'm just going to say that the positive die is that he walks on by, because I think it will be a bit easier for Taylor to ignore them, you know, and not get into too much trouble with Lucretia for like fucking off and doing something else. So yeah, positive. Well, walk on by, and of course they have to put in the Oblivion die as well. So no input from the Oblivion die, but we got a 9 on the negative die and a 3 on the positive die. So actually, Daddykind is going to sit right next to them. And I named Daddykind's Harrison, because I'm really bad with names. And he sits there and he goes to the barkeep, bring me a regular. And Taylor is just filled with a dead coldness. He hasn't aged all that much. The lights are bouncing all around and just see like the highlights of age folded within his skin, just how unpleasant everything is around him and how his very being is very unpleasant. And she is just staring at him, her eyes widened, and obviously Lucretia is just noticing this. Is there a problem, duckling? And Taylor's just not going to say anything. It's just feeling up with this rage, and she just has an opportunity, you know, just to hurt him a little bit. Now, reading my flux roll, I think that when they orders the drink, I think that she's, you know, when he's obviously going to take a bit and plop it down. I think that she's wanting to try and do something to try and at least make him ill, because obviously fermented drinks, you know, alcohol could turn quite unpleasant, I believe. I'll have to do a fucking check on that anyway, but letting things ferment too much, and there's probably something in the drinks or whatever that could give him alcohol poisoning as well. So I think she's going to do that. So we're going to use flux again, and what is it? Dex plus flux. Put a hand over the glass or whatever, sort of envisioning that whatever powers a Wraith can do is just sort of like seeping into the water, as it were, or at least going into the glass and like being absorbed that way around. So Dex is 3, Flux is 1. Yeah, so all of those bar 1 were 1s. One of them was a 10. So, actual fact, that's a botch. God, what would that do? I think what would actually happen here is that she puts the hand on the glass, and I think rather than doing what she intends to do is like making it, like, essentially spiking his drink with this energy and like fermenting and speeding up the process, as it were. I think she does that and just causes the glass to explode, and the guy and her dad just fucking loses his fucking temper, like shouting or whatever, like he's got some goons with them, and he like fucking, you know, he fucks off. He doesn't want to make a show and tell, hey, this isn't his turf or whatever. Well, you know, it's not the right place to do so. He's not a fucking idiot, as it were. He's just fucking storms off, maybe with some cuts on his face, or maybe his hand, he goes to grab it up again.
Oh, you're such a failure. I could have easily have done worse than that, but you... What a colossal fuck-up you turned out to be. To think if you hadn't have swooped away by the feds, you could have been a very successful person like him, rather than some cheap little bitch.
And she's just going to visibly ground her teeth together. It's just... Lucretia's not going to make any passing comment about all of this, but just clearly something is up with these two, so Lucretia knows a bit more about us. We would move on to the next scene, which is to the graveyard. As you enter the new scene, leaving body electric behind, determine if a random scene occurs and play out the interaction. So, the way that this is done is rather simple. We're going to roll a d10, and then half the result. We're going to roll the result, and if it equals to our temporary angst half rounded down, then a random scene is going to occur, and we have got 5 dots in temporary angst, so let's see what happens. 10 halved rounded down is 5 exactly. So we need to come over to the random scene generation and work out exactly what's going to happen. Which again involves us rolling another d10. 2. A new NPC appears. Ooh, spicy stuff. I have some idea what this could be, but I'm not going to let that dictate things too much at the moment. I'll see if what I roll with the scene generation table influences my initial idea. So, the activity table first. 92, which gives us revenge. That's feeding into some of the ideas that I'm having. And 41, advice. Revenge advice. Alright, I've got an idea. I think how this is actually... Oh, this is involving a new NPC, isn't it? It's not just a generic conversation. Right, okay. So, I know what this is. Okay, so the revenge bit, I was thinking that it was to do with the Legionnaire that was dancing with us. But the advice bit, I think our little dance and shove was seen by a renegade. You know, I'm really leaning into this idea, and I think as we're trying to leave the club, or we're just about to leave it, like these wraiths at the door, or maybe it's just 1 or 2 of them, you know, not to overwhelm us or whatever. It's like, hey, you're the one that had a little tango with Darren, didn't you? I put down the Legionnaire's name as Darren, just the name that came to mind. Yeah, so what? You really made him look like a right old fool and made some of his friends just now. Nice one. Thanks. And Taylor begins to walk on, not really taking much interest, and the renegade will put his hand on you. You know, I think I've seen you around before. It's Taylor, isn't it? Like, I think... Yeah, what about it? Just, what do you want? Just leave me alone. Just... You know what? You could do a lot more than this, just rather than... Wouldn't it be great just like to push around Legionnaires all the time and just really make them show what for? And Lucretia, I imagine, will just like swoop in a little bit. I'm sorry to interrupt the little conversation, but we have a little job to do. So maybe another time. And she'll put her arm round protectively round Taylor, you know, to establish that there's a bit more of a protection going here, sort of like a motherly figure or whatever. And as they're sort of leaving out of the club, it will sort of be, come back here if you want to really make a difference. And Taylor just sort of doesn't really know what she wants to do with her own life. And Lucretia will just probably give her, you know, a little talk about the renegade. After all, she is new to all of this, and they probably need a bit of a conversation about this, that, and the other regarding the renegades. Probably heard plenty about the hierarchy, but this probably be the first chat regarding the renegades. The two of you begin the journey towards the graveyard. The club now a series of distant gothic booms behind you. The storm around you has become worse, with a successful Argos roll hinting at the arrival of a maelstrom, as the storm is not just present in the Skinlands but the Shadowlands as well. So we're going to roll for Lucretia. Now, Lucretia, as I mentioned, is slightly stronger, and the Argos rating is 1. So what does slightly stronger mean in this context? Well, we can generate NPC strength levels with all of this, of varying power levels. So when we continue to use NPCs on the fly, we don't have to make up character sheets. We can just grab a handful of D10 and just work out, what is that we need to do from there. But with Argos, we are able to work out, storms and whatnot. So we're going to roll. Perception and Argos is appropriate as we're doing stuff with a storm, and Lucretia is slightly stronger, which for the dice pool is between 3 and 4 dice. So we are going... Oh, slightly stronger, I was reading slightly weaker. Slightly stronger is actually 7. So 1 for the Argos and another 6, but not that it really matters. So that takes away. There's a thing. There's another one that takes a success away. So that leaves with 3 successes. Lucky Lucretia. Lucretia would probably pass a comment here, something on the lines of, the storm's getting worse, and not just in the Skinlands. Lucretia, who's got her hands in her coat pockets or whatever, her relic bag bouncing up and down, she's walking about. What do you mean? Have you not noticed that you can feel the rain on your shoulders now? And Taylor's walking along with Lucretia, no longer with her arms round her. It's yeah, so? That ain't a regular storm, Duckling. That's a maelstrom. We've got a bad storm coming along. Best hurry. And Taylor's just whatever.
Oh, you're so doom and gloom. You have this one friend and you're treating them like garbage. Just because you're absolute shit doesn't mean that everybody else needs to be treated like it too.
Taylor just grumble, just fuck off. Lucretia will go, did you say something? No. She will try and take her mind off of things by asking you how you've been since you've last met and coping with being a Wraith. What do you say? What are you prepared to share? What does she say back? Well, Taylor isn't going to say very much. It's very clear from their body language and closed offness that they're very uncomfortable with being a Wraith. Life was pretty difficult as a human, and it's pretty difficult for them now. I think she's going to be most vocal about the voice of the shadow of the back of her head, and Lucretia will try and comfort her the best that she can, not saying or doing too much, because there's this age gap issue. There's the fact that Taylor's not wanting to open up too much, and Lucretia's wise enough not to force the conversation out of them. Eventually, you reach part of a street devoid of life and noise except for the loud preaching of a group of wraiths in the distance. So, making the appropriate perception roll, difficulty 7, we can determine what they are. So, we're going to do perception, and I'm going to give them perception and awareness. 4 and 2, which makes 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Will the shadow input here at all, I think? It's not really important for the shadow, I think. So we got... Oh, that's a lot of successes. All of them are successes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Wowzers. Okay, so Taylor is on there like a fucking hawk. Just probably hears it before Lucretia does, for sure, and just whips their head towards what's going on. It's difficulty 7. Oh, that changes things a little bit. Oh, it's 5 successes, so changes it by 1. They identified a group of 5 wraiths as heretics preaching about transcendence. If your character is associated with the heretics, decrease the difficulty by 2. Oh, well. They're not, so we're not going to. Generate a scene to determine what the heretics are doing and play out the interaction. So I think they would know a little bit about transcendence. Lucretia might have mentioned it a little bit. Obviously, with the whole thing with life web and fetters, I think that might have come up in conversation somehow. So we need to generate the scene and see what's actually going on. Now, whether we get involved with this or not is a completely different matter. So, 94 gives us debate. 65, debate, obligation. I think that there's some sort of sermon that's going into place. You got this preacher person that's standing at the doorstep of somebody's house or whatever, which is probably serving as a haunt of some description. And you've got these other wraiths that have come forward, or maybe it was you've got the heretic leader, 2 bodyguards or representatives, and then the other 2. Yeah, 2, I can't do maths. Come forward. Actually, let's do it the other way around. They lead a heretic, second in command, and then the other 3 that comes towards them. And they've got an obligation to serve, to stomp out heresy in all of its forms, to educate about transcendence and all the rest of it. A speech trying to draw people in that way round. Does our individual see these two wandering about and going to try and coax them in? I'm going to say that the heretics are, this one who's preaching is like a similar strain, so I'm going to give them a dice pool of 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And just roll that, and if they get a difficulty of... I'm going to say that because they're more focused on what's going on with their own speech and whatnot, I'm going to make this difficulty 7, just so it's not immediately obvious at that, and our two characters are off in the distance somewhat. So that's one success. One success, because that's a botch. That takes that away. Yeah, I don't think that's enough for them to see what's going on. Maybe. I think they might be looking around, but I don't think it's enough for them to really see what's going on as they sort of like carry on and giving this whole big old preach about transcendence and how they help you, got to help us sort of thing, you know, and this sort of do this little operation, as it were. And I don't think Taylor would take that much notice. Maybe she's thinking a little bit about the idea of transcendence, but I think it's going to be more Lucretia, like putting their hands around them and just like walking off into the distance, which takes us to the third scene. Once you and Lucretia have dealt with the heretics, roll to see if a random scene occurs. So once again, we have to do a random scene roll and see if it is equal to or lower than our angst half rolled down. 6, which takes us to... Yes, a random scene does occur. So let's go back to the random scene table and roll on this random scene table. 5, which has something positive happens to an NPC. Now, this isn't a new NPC, but one that is with us at the moment. Now, I'm going to do a binary roll to see if this is an NPC that... So really, the only NPC that's with us at the moment is Lucretia. So it could be it would make sense that something positive happens to her, which is pretty helpful given the situation that we're about to walk into potentially. Or this could be an NPC that's around us that we see on our journey. So I think the negative would be an NPC that's not with us at the moment because Taylor's going to be distracted and run off and do see what's going on with them. And it will probably annoy Lucretia a little bit. So negative is going to be other NPC. Positive is going to be Lucretia herself. Positive was a 9. 5 was the negative. So it's something that positive happens with Lucretia. And I've got no idea what this could be. So I'm going to go back to the scene generation table and see if we can use that to flesh out what happens with her exactly. 33 gives us the result of stop. Knowing what's going to happen in this next scene, might speed up the fucking scenario a bit. And 85. Sorcery? Nunny? What happens if I swap those around so it becomes 58? Scheme. Stop scheme. Okay, so I'm going to read out what's seen the graveyard. The graveyard is closed off in an old fence decorated with spiring vines and crusted with bird feces. Shit. As quick mortals, you would have to climb through the gate, door, or over the fence. As wraiths, you can pass through it for a minor sacrifice, which is the expenditure of some corpus. That would, however, assume that digging hasn't already begun. The front gate wall has been demolished, with the increased rain turning the cobble and mud path into a dank slurry that comes up to your shins. Around the perimeter are a few modular buildings, one occupied by a security guard who has fallen asleep. Now, I wouldn't actually want to read the rest of this because stop scheme implies to me that there's something that's happening to the NPC Lucretia. I would say that all of this has begun to move away. I'm actually going to say that that this whole scheme, as it were, has stopped, that they've moved, they're beginning to move away. In the time it's taken for Lucretia to go from the club to us and then all the rest of it, it would imply to me that everyone's packing up and leaving, which is kind of bizarre, really. And it does bring up some pretty worrying questions, really. So I'm actually going to generate a scene to try and work out what happens. Now, this is why I feel that this isn't really much of a spoiler, because chances are you're not going to get a result like that. I mean, there's every chance this could happen to you in your playing, but we're not going to experience the rest of the chronicle the way that it's written now, I don't think, because everything's been stopped by this weird scenario, but chances are there's something more sinister afoot. So I'm going to generate another scene to see if there are like any clues or indication about what's going on, and then depending on what's happening, we can use other roles in our character sheet to try and see if Taylor or Lucretia notices these. So I'm going to generate the scene first. 64 gives us observe, and 3 domain. Observe domain. Huh. What happens if I swap domain mode so that becomes 30? Or project. What was observed 64 to what's 46? I can't fucking read that word. Materialize. Observe a project. Well, I think this definitely confirms that this project has become, that it has halted at the very least. That I think what this means is that rather than seeing the aftermath like everybody has fucked off, I think this means that everybody has left. Like, or maybe there's just like, everyone is leaving, sorry, rather, and like vehicles and whatnot are coming and going and beginning to move out, and like maybe it's like a late night news reporter, maybe there's a protest has like has begun to happen, like this very old and ancient site, you know how disrespectful it is. And Lucretia and us just walked to the scene and just seen all of this happen like this, and it sort of brings a tear maybe to Lucretia's eye, as it were, which kind of speeds up the process a little bit. And Taylor is probably just going to like look around this, look up and see what's going on and whatnot, and just think, can I go now? Or do you want me to, you know, stick around and see if everything's alright? Or I think Lucretia would probably want just to make sure that the haunt in question is okay, so they'd go over and see if the actual cemetery itself was in good stead. So I think we should do a binary roll for that. Obviously we want it to be in good stead, so it's going to be okay is positive. No, that didn't end up very well, because that's a 1 and the negative is a 4. So I think, whilst still within the realms of being positive, it's sort of taken some damage, but it's still serviceable as a haunt, because the way that I feel that this would work is that haunts and the way that the things that are represented in the Shadowlands is that buildings and whatnot look to how people remember them. So whilst there may be like a bit of the brickwork that's missing or like a scuff or whatnot, looking at the Shadowlands, it looks the same, and it will look the same on the inside as well, or maybe with like a brighter coat of paint. Like as time has weathered it on the Skinlands, it sort of remained the same gothic architecture on the inside or whatever, and that sort of make Lucretia rather happy with all of this as they're sort of sitting and standing around in their haunt. Just, she probably feels a bit stupid how quickly things have turned, you know, expecting them to like to force the people out, but now she's just really happy, and Taylor's just sort of like sitting there with this like weird look on her face, like seeing a ghost smile and happy that their home, which is a graveyard, is making them smile. You know, death is sort of making them happy, as it were.
Why must you be so glum? Why can't you just be happy for somebody else? Why? Just so selfish. It's all about you. Selfish bitch.
Taylor would just sort of like scowl or that, looking around, you know, just festering a bit more on this negative vibe, as it were, and just sitting around. The storm's picking up a bit more, and we march forward a bit more in time, and this maelstrom does actually happen as the two sort of make light conversation, emphasis on light. They probably see through like a gap in the door or whatever, as it's not shut properly, that there's spectres dancing about. As now spectres can't enter haunts, and they're probably aware that there's like other wraiths and wild, so they're fairly safe within the maelstrom. Taylor is probably just a bit frightened by these monstrous ghosts, you know, who I imagine are sort of like scuttling about on their arms and limbs like puppets that are trying to learn to walk for the first time, whatever. Maybe one of them is doing like the whole exorcist on their hands and legs sort of thing, like elongated tongues, sewn up eyes, real monstrous fiends, naked as babes, but like sewn up like ugly patchwork. Probably making Lucretia feel a bit uncomfortable as well, but she's probably sat a bit closer to Taylor, like, you're safe here, and you're safe with me. Taylor looks up and just looks back out, seeing the little that she can see, these hurrying creatures. Thank you. I said thank you. You know, for looking after me and shit. Of course. Not of course. You got rough-handled by a legionnaire just because I looked pretty. Wouldn't take no for an answer. You said that there were other reapers who would take me away and make me a slave. So no, she just sort of like tails off at that point. She's just sort of been used to being abused by people and is just unsure what to make of this. I think Taylor is just naturally just very suspicious of Lucretia, and obviously Lucretia can pick up on that. You know, they just sit and be. Lucretia probably won't touch or handle Taylor in much of a sense, just sort of letting her be, not wanting to get in the way and such. Which I think is a rather appropriate place to end the first session, really. It's funny that it got cut short a little bit the way that it did, but I think, you know, I don't want to force things out for the sake of forcing them out, and also there are many more sessions coming up with Season 2 of the Playing With Diceself podcast. We're playing Wraith the Oblivion 20th Anniversary Edition. Now, I've got no idea what the next session is going to entail, but it's sort of, we've bonded our relationship a bit more with Lucretia. I imagine that Lucretia's going to be more helpful and nurturing as time goes by, but I don't think she's going to be focusing too much on like watching over Taylor, like following where she goes. She like want to let Taylor explore and do whatever it is that she needs to do. And of course, we have seen our daddykins still very much in the flesh, kicking about, still doing his thing. So Taylor's got that going on at the back of her mind to work on as well, and also trying to go back to her foster mum and do shit with that. She's got to go and visit her partner Courtney at some point, and all the other fun little stuff that Wraiths have got to do. And what the fuck we're going to do, I have no idea, because we're generating the next story entirely on the fly. And even with this one shot here, we've generated scenes and made this story really unique and introduced new characters with some very simple dice rolls. So you can experience Floodlands for yourself and actually deal with the proper encounter at the end, provided the dice rolls in your favour or not in your favour, depending on your outlook on life. So if you like this, don't forget to like the video and share and subscribe to all that love what I do. Check out the various Wraith the Oblivion source books in the description below. Go and grab the Hopeful Damned when it comes out. Do keep you on touch with the Law by Night social media pages and the YouTube community tabs. I'm very active there. And I'll see you on the next episode of the Playing With Diceself podcast, and the next upload, whatever that may well be for you. And until next time, farewell.